So we're going to get into the captioning of your work. And now a lot of people somehow find it challenging. I certainly did. What do I say? What don't I say? How much should I say? Why should I say it? Well, in essence, you should have captioning. Okay? Don't be one of those minimalists too much. Just a little bit. Just have a bit of captioning. Because you should put your work in context, and in order to do that, you have to give us some background. Now, your work will speak for itself as much as possible. It's a must. It puts your work in context, as I mentioned, and it gives credit to credit where credit's due. It's a big one. Because a lot of the times, and I can vouch for this, my last project that I did for a company back home in Sydney, it won some awards. One of them was the Australian Creativity and Effectiveness Awards for data strategy. And there was about, I don't know, at least 10 to 12 people on that project. So it's important to show literally spell out who were the people that were involved. I was the art director and lead designer for that project, so that's what I put. But then I also attributed who was the creative director, who was the digital design team, who was a videographer, everyone else. It's a team effort. And it's a kind of rule of thumb to give credit to where it's due. And it shows your role. Oh, this guy has done this for that project. Pretty sure he can do that for this upcoming one too. Okay, it's a simple thing. And a lot of what the triggers that I listed before for you guys, relevance, competence, what else they have, content quality, all of this stuff paints that picture for them. It's important to caption, okay? So let's go through this. Client. It's a simple case of naming who the work was for. Now, if it's for a university or design school brief, then of course, name who that client was for, or just state that it was a brief, that was a personal project. Yes?
A quick question on this and then the previous in terms of captioning.
Yeah.
To link or not to link?
To link or not to link, that is the question.
Exactly.
I like that.
So people that you work with, do you link back to them or their website, or the client or their website, or do you keep them sticking to your website?
That's a good question. I personally don't.
Okay.
Because it will interrupt the flow.
Exactly.
If they want to know about that person, they can hit them up on Google.
Okay.
I don't think that that's necessary.
Okay. I didn't know if it was
link
proper
to theirs. However, you're more than welcome to do that. If you feel that there's a strong business partnership between you and that other person that you work with, go right ahead. It might help or hinder, but for me, I don't do that.
Okay.
The next is agency. So name the company or studio where you did the work at. Really simple case. Again, if it's for a university or a made-up brief, just put personal project or university assignment. It's okay to have personal projects. You should have personal projects. And if they're like, oh, you did some work for Pepsi, well, no, they're not going to think that because you've captioned it as personal project. You can even, describe in there, and we're going to get to it, this was a personal project because I wanted to attempt doing XYZ. Challenge. What was the primary objective? Then that's where you'd put that. So essentially give me at least 2 to 3 sentences on what you had to do. What was the task? Was it to heighten awareness for this target demographic? Was it measurable in that we had to sell 500,000 bottles? The task was to point the awareness for this new initiative, but they only had $1,000 to do that. Put it in context, guys. Whatever gives the employer the idea of you're presenting a solution. Tell me the problem first, because it can be a great design, but if it's way off, then it's not going to show you much of your design thinking. Okay. Next is the role. Again, specify that, just be really transparent. I have a lot of projects where I've taken it from concept to finished art, so I just say that. I have some projects where it's only just one thing, and it could be typography. And I did a 650-page manual for the Green Building Council of Australia, and they were selling that book, that manual, at $600 a pop. It took me 3 months to complete typesetting that 600-page manual. That was a nightmare. But I got really good at typesetting, so there's always a plus. But my point is, my role was simply typesetting. So I put that. It was an epic task. Then they know I can type. This guy can typeset 650 pages. Results. If it didn't do so well, then leave it out. If it did well, great. It might win an award later on, so whack it on there. It could be that it exceeded the expectation. So let's say you had on the challenge caption what the target was, and you met that, put it on there. We met the target of da-da-da-da-da in 1 month. Okay? So, before we wrap up, are there any other questions in regards to creating a portfolio?
I have a question. It's a bit irrelevant for this one. But you mentioned about the personal logo.
Personal logo.
Yeah. Like, does anybody need logo, or
a logo?
Like, yeah.
Yeah. As in.
As a designer.
Good question. Okay. So the question was really, should we have a personal logo for ourselves designed?
Yeah.
There are two things to this. One, to answer that shortly, yes. Okay. Two, don't go too far with it. Don't go too far that your logo limits you. You see, if your logo is very stylized, very feminine, for example, very cursive and script-like, as an example, that is going to give me a whole bunch of perception before I even get to your design work of what you do. So that can help you or hinder you. So unless you are doing that style day in, day out, keep it a very simple typography formatting of your name. You should have one. But I'm not telling you to go all out and brand this very unique. I mean, let's be honest, guys. If you look at Chris McLean, and he and many others do this, they just use Helvetica, right? We see so many posters of Helvetica. I'm not saying to design your name in Helvetica, but at the very least, make it legible and make sure that it at least feels like you. Okay? If it's bold, and you're a very bold, masculine person, then do that. If you're very petite and very, sensitive and shy, maybe you might have it a little bit thinner. That's your logo, by the way. Your logo doesn't have to be a full-on designed icon. Typeset it. Typeset it and have that typography consistent with your website. Let's say you're choosing, off the top of my head, Google Web Font, Oswald. If Oswald was what I'm choosing for my subheadings and as the typography for my navigation, if nothing else, make Oswald your name at the top left. Yeah, I hope that answers that, because it can be a daunting thing. It's like, they're going to judge me on my logo, and well, keep it simple. Cannot go wrong with that. Get them to your work as quick as possible.
We've got a question here in the chat, and this one comes from Sarah G. And Sarah says, I recently got let go from a company in the sports industry but due to confidentiality agreements, I'm not able to put anything I've worked on in my portfolio until it's released in about 2 years. So now that I'm looking for a new job, I don't have anything to show that I've worked on. What do you suggest that I do show to find this work without stepping on anyone's toes from that company?
Yeah, okay, that's a really tricky one.
Not easy.
Look, fact of the matter is, if there are legal parameters in place, what can you do there? I mean, there's one thing that comes to mind. I've personally not been in that situation. However, I always talk to the principal owner of the business or the company owner or the creative director or all of these people. And I sit down with them and let them know, hey, look, I'm so glad that I worked on that project with you. And is it okay if I include that in my portfolio? And I'll include the captioning of all those that are involved. This person's situation is quite unique in that they're kind of, tied to not having any flexibility. So if you've gone and spoken to your employer, or your previous employer rather, and they won't budge, then look, I'm afraid that there's a couple of things to this though, because you had, I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, you've touched that project, you've played a role in that project. So you have, in my opinion, some rights to show that, but I don't want you to go by my legal advice. So I would just have to say, don't let that limit you. You're just going to have to create your own briefs and design some other work, unfortunately. But it could be good for you too, because are those your best pieces?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's a good answer, and it is always good to say yes. Not giving any legal advice here. Every situation is going to be unique. But I know that while you said that, our students here had some looks on their faces. So I want to get some opinions here. What do you guys think about that question? And if you were in that position?
Sierra, go ahead.
I was wondering your thoughts. It kind of piggybacks off that, but maybe replacing the text. Maybe if it's important information or private information with dummy text. Is that something that's looked down upon?
Right. So Sierra was talking about switching the information, like let's say if it was copy and replacing that with lorem ipsum or dummy text type of thing. I still think you won't be able to get away with that personally, because it's going to be branded with the same design styles, and you can pass it off as a work in progress, but yeah, I think the elements are still quite similar to a large degree. But again, it's almost like designing something that you're unhappy with. It takes a lot of effort. You're best to just come up with some other kick-ass designs from scratch, something that you really love. Yeah, Val.
I've worked in agencies where this is kind of an issue, and how people have gotten around it is said, you have a kick-ass portfolio to get you in the door, and then you have that stuff, get the permission to show it on paper, take it with you,
Right.
That's.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I think you're not flashing this to the world. You can bring it into the interview, and you might even say, actually, that's a really great point, because you articulated it exactly how I was thinking it earlier, which was basically having those printed pieces or the work that you did, but only showing it and making sure you don't give it to them to keep only during interview situations. And maybe over the phone you could say, actually, I'm bound by contract to not show publicly some work that I've done. But I'd love to just show you some printouts of it when we meet face to face. Yeah, so that's really good. Yes.
Ariana Orland,
yes.
Ariana Orland, I think she touched a little bit on that. She had you could be on your site and you can put a password on private documents.
Yeah, I still think confidentiality agreement, it's very down the line, like black or white. You probably can't. I know that contract she's talking about, the legals with that. You just can't show it at all, regardless of that. Although that is an online version of showing them a printout on an interview, isn't it? So, yeah.
especially like in LinkedIn or your resume or the information on your website with the companies that you've worked for.
Yeah.
You could put a project in there, worked with this company for 2 years on a project that's confidential and is not going to be released for 2 years, which builds excitement and interest. And then you can go in and speak about it without showing anything and not breaking any laws.
Absolutely, yeah. You're going to have to leverage those key points there. You know, you've got to let them know that it will be available.
And it's
just
build
not
excitement,
yet.
for sure.
Yeah, yes, for 2 years.
Well,
that's how good it is.
Hopefully they hire you.
You know?
Before the
Yeah.
If you
So-
work on films, that's what happens.
Yeah,
You're not
for
allowed
sure.
to
Right, exactly.
say anything.
Just
Yeah.
the company alone would probably help you at least get your foot in the door.
Right,
To have
yeah,
that
so-
conversation and describe what you did.
Absolutely. Name who it was that you worked for and with, and give a bit of background to that. You can do that on your LinkedIn or your resume or over the phone or over interviews. Put a logo of the company, you know, if you know, I'm sure you're allowed to do that, and you could caption that as this project is currently under development and it will be released in 2 years. It's a long time.
It shows
Yeah.
that you keep confidentiality too,
Right.
especially for those
Yeah.
companies who are looking for that.
And again, it goes back to transparency, doesn't it? Tell it how it is, show it how it is, and it's that I am bound by contract not to reveal the work, but this was my role, this was the challenge, this was this. And if all you can show is maybe a logo of that and maybe a photograph of a very, you know, not the work, a photograph of what they do, then at least that's a discussion point that you can bring up during your interviews.
Yeah, this is great because I think that people in the chat room had a lot of opinions about this too. It really sparked a conversation, but people are offering their comments, their opinions on this. And TWF in the chat says, well, you might be able to have an agreement that allows showing your work in an interview environment, but not posting it online and having ownership of it online. Sometimes just having worked for that big company who has the confidentiality agreement may get you in the door. They don't need to know the details. They just know you worked for that company on a confidential project.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's great. It's great that we've covered that online and similar discussions to what we were having here. Another question here.
I was just going to add to that point. I think I work in a similar industry in like the retail environment. I can't show what I've got to other companies because we're always working ahead of the game. But in a good way, if you're in that situation, I think you could make it into, it's a platform to make your own hero project. It's like, what would I do to this project if I didn't have the company restraints off? How could I make this better and make a real kick-ass project? You've no ties and you can't show that, but what would you have done if you could have just gone all out? And then it comes to one of those personal projects, but then you've got so much like involvement in it that you can have potentially have a hero piece to it.
Yeah, there's so many ways you can go with it, isn't it? And I like what you said there. You know, if you did have to do it all again or make it better, how would you do it? Because you have had the background. Maybe that is the brief. You know the brief. You don't need to make up one. So dive into it again if you wanted to. Absolutely, yeah, you can do that. So there's always an opportunity here, guys. You know, it's a tough one, but again, don't let that stop you. You just can't let it stop you. You know, ask yourself, what would your mentor do? You know, those that are already incredibly established, would they stop at that point? And I'm not saying that you are at all by any means, but look broadly and remember that you have an opportunity to create anything you want. And you know, if you're going to fight that battle, just ask yourself, is that one that I want to fight, or should I just let that fish go and revisit it in 2 years? You know.